I'm so grateful to be here with people of faith, because it is a story of faith that I can't always say in an audience that is mixed, because we're not political and we're interfaith. But so 150 years later, in the 1830s, a young man named John Augustus McNear was born in Wiscasset. And he was an intrepid young man. Background, many McNears had met a watery grave, building the eastern seaboards in the waters as they sailed from Maine with the lumber, and again building the eastern seaboard. But he heard there were gold in them hills of California. And what does a young man do when he gets into his 20s? Intrepid young man, go west. And lo and behold, he did. But he packed his earthly belongings on the ship, but he missed the boat. Now, what a young man was doing in his 20s to miss the boat, that was not getting the next airline out of Wiscasset. And so his earthly belongings went around the Tierra del Fuego. He went via horseback through the Isthmus of Panama, through raging rivers and malaria-infested jungles, arrived on the Pacific coast, caught the old Sonora, and went up to San Francisco, only to find his boat had sunk. Don't curse the darkness, light a candle. But he had shipping background, so he went up to Petaluma, and his father-in-law had just moved there. He had started the American Hotel in Petaluma. And so intrepid young man decides he couldn't afford to go to the gold country, so he started the shipping business. And in San Francisco, you can see the skyline over there. In fact, you can see a faint Salesforce Tower. You see that over here, and the Golden Gate Bridge is over here, Angel Island. And anyway, as the story goes, so we started the shipping industry and the steamer gold that brought the eggs, milk, and butter to San Francisco. Well, he realized that people coming from gold country couldn't just keep putting the gold under their mattress. They needed a bank. So he started the Bank of Sonoma. Then they needed homes and houses. He started a real estate business. Tragedy had hit his first wife, Clara. The steamer gold, the ship actually preceding the steamer gold caught on fire, and she died. So he had to go purchase a cemetery, and that cemetery today is called Cypress Hill in Petaluma. At the very crest, all the McNears are buried, including both of my parents. Someday it will be my permanent zip code, but I've got a lot of work to do, God willing, on this planet before I get to dig underground and have communications channels indefinitely. But so he becomes one of the first self-made millionaires in California. But there were the robber barons who had a little more ego and, bravado. Leland Stanford, Carlos Huntington, Mark Hopkins, they had mansions in the city, but he had beautiful home in Petaluma. And when people would gather at his birthday, he would give to everyone. And he developed a reputation for being an incredible philanthropist. Well, he had the money then to buy 2,500 acres of land in the southern shores of Petaluma. Now, I have had paintings that I have seen recently, Southern Shores of Petaluma, which we're going to see later. And part of that 2,500 acres of land today is now called Glenwood, Peacock Gap, McNear's Beach, China Camp, and Back Ranch and Miwok Meadows. And so they were an intrepid bunch, and my dearest father just passed away 3 months ago in my arms. He was living here for the last year, and I got to hear all these stories, and just stories that are not written in a textbook. And I would love to work with all of you to tell the true story of these roots of Marin County. Now, I asked my grandmother, McNear, Lucretia, who actually got married in this valley. There was a big house, and there's the big house, it's a prison, but the other big house is at the end of Night Drive, and they donated it actually to to the church. It's now the Episcopal Church, and it was sold, but it's another story for another time. But anyway, this is my grandmother McNear, and I've just, cleaning out my father's home this past week, I found this, and there were 400 people by horse and buggy that came because the McNears, by the time the granddaughter was born at McNear's Beach, Lucretia McNear, Tufts McNear, because again, those McNears also believed so much in education, and they would name their girls Lucretia throughout generations. My middle name's Lucretia, and it was a secret to pass through generations that women must be educated. And my grandmother Lucretia Tufts, the Tufts family, found Tufts University on the East Coast in Boston, and Jackson was the first women's college ever established in the United States. And again, that was never taking for granted the power of women. So again, there was nothing here. It was just a working ranch. You milked the cows, you lived the land, you respected the land. And this is something very careful that I just have excavated. But John A. McNear's son, Erskine B. McNear, was the postmaster of Marin County. How about that? On the 28th of August, and I'm finding these things, again, not written in history. I'll let you kind of gently pass that around, or maybe we'll gently put it back in the, yeah, maybe gently. We'll put it on, if you wouldn't mind putting it, yeah, we'll put it on here. All these things, I'll just leave it here, provided it doesn't rain. So, so when I asked Granny, how did Marin County get its name? This was her home, and she pointed out, and she said, well, Heidi, those are the Marin Islands. Do you know why they're called the Marin Islands? I said, no, Granny. Why? She said, well, when the Spanish Armada came through settled the San Francisco Bay, they were looking to capture the Indian, the Native American, the chief. Well, it actually, the Miwoks were women governed. So, but they caught what they thought was the man, and they shackled him. They proceeded around the islands to drink and ultimately got drunk. And in the middle of the night, this Native American cut off his foot, bandaged it, got into an umiak, which is a canoe, and made it to the land by morning. The Spaniards picked up the foot, and they called him the Grand Marinero, the Grand Mariner, and hence the name Marin County. So he was Chief Marin, but he didn't have a business card that said Chief Marin, right? He was named Chief Marin. But those are stories told to me by my grandmother. So makes sense. So little stories not written in history books yet. But I hope you'll all help me, and we can research and fill these stories in together, because I think where we come from is so much a part of where we are in the world. Throughout the years, he saw, Captain John A. McNear, the social injustices that were happening to the Chinese people. They had, he felt, put their life on the line to put the dynamite in, to blow up the granite, to make the tunnels for the gold rush. And they put their lives on the line in building the Transcontinental Railroad, which ultimately connected outside of Salt Lake City, Utah. And so no Golden Gate Bridge, he sailed to San Francisco, and he said, I've got land. Would you like to come? Well, they were primarily men, male workers from China. And he said, as my grandmother told me, do you like women? I said yes, so he sent for their wives, and it started a fishing village, and that's where we're going to go in a few minutes here, and that was called China Camp. They not only came to the land to live there safely with their families, but they started a shipping industry, a dried shrimp business, exporting 3 million pounds of dried shrimp to China annually. So that's kept a very nice friendship between the McNear family over the years and the Chinese Consul General. Despite the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, the Chinese village was burned, and they went to my grandfather, McNear Erskine Baker, and said, what do we do? And he said, we'll rebuild around the next cove. And that didn't make the federal government terribly happy. It was the first federal act targeting an ethnic minority, but he just believed in that relationship of people, respecting the land. So this is just a shot, again, I just found at the brickyard, but this is no Peacock Gap, no Glenwood, just a barn right over here, which are now condos that my dad would milk the cows. And, you know, every day before he'd go to work and go to school, he'd walk to San Rafael High School. And just when I was raising my 4 children, couldn't understand why you need all these carpools. Damn it, walk, get on your horse, you know? So Daddy died at 93, and what a character. But I learned a lot from him, and my grandmother McNear passed away in 1993, 1993. Little did I know she left me this home with a simple message: do something for peace. And I told my father, I can't do anything for peace. And he said, she believed in you. And the rest is history, because the toast was made in the living room of our home, and you can see above the fireplace. So many stories to share. I know it's getting cold, but Treasure Island in 1939 had the World's Fair, but they didn't allow the Chinese because they just didn't like those coolies, right? So, but they built a monument. A beautiful entry ended up being of China, and when you leave today, you'll see the hand-carved beautiful monuments that were at the entrance. And our family's going to donate that to Treasure Island because they're refurbishing it. And again, you know, we're not about politics, any of us. You know, I'm a proud American, Democrat, Republican, you know, doesn't matter what color. You know, the faith in our hearts, the politics in our mind are the color of our hand. I believe that the eradication of landmines worldwide is an act of peace. And, you know, shortly after Diana died, and I had survived cancer, another story, when I was 30 years old, I thought, you know, what can I do to give back with the gift of life? And it was a prayer that I made to God when going under the knife at 30. Dear God, grant me the gift of life, and I will do something special with it. Well, when Diana died, it just hit me like an epiphany that cancer is a landmine. None of us know when we're going to step on it. And landmines are a cancer to the earth.